Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, your home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Well, New Haven Bank has been making community tick. It actually started making us tick in 1784, when the first bank in New Haven was created with that name to be a community bank, helping small enterprises. And that's now the name of a bank you used to know of as Start Bank, based at Whaley Avenue and Sherman Avenue. It's our community bank. It's New Haven's bank. That's why they renamed it New Haven Bank last year. And right now, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, New Haven Bank is playing a crucial role in keeping us employed and keeping our economy going during what's looking like a recession, if not a depression. The CEO of New Haven Bank is Maureen. And in the midst of all this craziness of the latest round of small business loans coursing through her bank, Maureen has made time to join us on the program. Good morning, Maureen, and thank you for making the time.
Morning, Paul. Thank you for having me.
So PPP, we've learned two acronyms that sound a lot like each other in this COVID crisis. PPE, personal protective equipment. People working in all sorts of jobs need that. And PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, of which hundreds of millions of dollars through it has flowed to the Small Business Administration, to small enterprises and large enterprises in our country. And a new round of $60 billion just got released by Congress so that community banks like yours, Maureen, get that money where it was supposed to have gone in the first place. Small enterprises. How are you guys doing distributing that money?
Well, I think that, we're doing what we're best at, Paul, and that is taking care of our community. The program, it was brought to the forefront with lightning speed by the Treasury, and I think you have to give credit to that. But the problem is that you've got, 5,000 banks trying to access the same point at the same time. So it hasn't been without frustration, but I think I think that was to be expected, and I think we were prepared for that. Our agenda has been with this program, as it is with everything we do, to help the citizens of New Haven and to help the community. So I think we've been very successful in helping small businesses get the money they need to remain open or to hire back employees. And hopefully those monies will be put to the use that they're intended, and they'll be forgiven. So what does that mean for the small business? It means they don't have to pay it back. And that is what makes this program so attractive, and it's the right thing to do to help these small businesses, not only in New Haven, obviously, but across the country.
So this pot of money has come in two pieces. The first piece came, it went to everyone just the same. Big banks, small banks, and there was a lot of controversy, as you know, because the rollout, as you pointed out, big program, didn't go as intended. They kept changing the rules, the websites kept crashing, the money ran out in no time. And as we've read in other publications, a lot of big companies got that money, including ones that weren't in trouble. So well, first of all, let's talk about that first round, because the second round is in the news now, because today is the first full day of its operation. And you talked about how you prepared for that, but let's spin back the clock a little bit. I guess it was 2 weeks ago, around Easter time, the first pot of money came. All sorts of banks were involved. How many loans were you able to give out for how much money in that first round, Maureen?
We've given, in the first round, we gave out about $10 million.
Mm-hmm.
And, for a bank that's $150 million in assets, it's a lot of money for us.
That's almost 10. Yeah. Okay.
It's a lot of applications for us. We're a small staff, and as I told you when we were talking before we went live, we are working with half our staff. We rotate everybody in and out so that they work from home a few days a week and they come to the office a couple of days a week. And we're spread out over 3 floors, so we're able to social distance quite effectively. So it's been a challenge from that vantage point, but we were able to help quite a number of customers. They're all in New Haven, every single one of them.
You mean all New Haven City proper, Maureen?
Yes, they are. Yes,
And
they
how many
are.
businesses was it for that 10 million?
51.
Well, what were some examples? That's a lot.
So 18 of our loans went to nonprofits in New Haven. 8 went to brand new customers that are New Haven-based businesses. 11 loans went to just deposit customers of the institution. 20
You
some
mean
odd loans.
for-profit, when you say deposit customers, meaning non for-profit businesses?
They would, they are for-profit and not for-profit. So to give you an example of some of the entities that we've lent to, Paul, because I've gotten their permission to use their names. Obviously, we need to be concerned about privacy issues here. But we were able to talk with some of our customers and ask them if we were to use their name in any type of media, would that be acceptable to them? So they said yes. So people like Emerge, ARC of Greater New Haven, LEAP, Taste of China, Campus Customs, Neighborhood Housing Services, New Haven Family Alliance, Catalina's Bakery, St. Martin de Porres, Solar Youth. Those are the types of entities that we have lent to during this program.
So, I remember because we were involved, we're a nonprofit, we were involved getting this. And one thing that was hard was not only did the website keep crashing, but the rules kept changing that first weekend. So everyone's hustling in round one to get that money because there wasn't enough. And everyone's trying at once. And do you remember, Maureen, did this happen with you? That they'd say, give us like, I think, annual payroll. And then they said, now we need quarterly after the thing had already begun. So people had to go back and get different documents. And if you were a nonprofit on the website, you put down that you're a nonprofit, but then they ask you who the owner is. A nonprofit doesn't have an owner. So you had to guess until they gave you direction days later when it was too late. You had to put down a person as the owner, even though they're not really the owner. What was your weekend like on Easter weekend when that was happening and you were hustling to get it in and it didn't quite make sense?
Well, we knew, Paul, and I think all the banks did, all the community banks in Connecticut, there's a lot of us, right? And, I think we all knew that there were going to be flaws in the system. And yes, they continued to change the guidance as we went along, but they also noted that, that they would honor any loans that were taken with the original guidance and hold up to their end of the bargain. So I think we have to have some faith in the Treasury and know that they're going to stand by what they put out. They realized the program was evolving, and as you start to roll it out, that's where you see the problems, right? So yes, we did experience that, and we just made it a point to make sure we read every single communication that came out, that we didn't miss anything, and that helped us to find our way and to do the things that we needed to do.
Maureen, how many staffers do you have? How big is your staff?
There's 21 people total. 5 of that are branch personnel. So
you had a 16-person team working on this.
Actually, we probably had an 8-person team working on it.
So here's a question I wanted to ask you when I was just listening to you. It made me wonder that while that's a small team up against bigger banks, I wonder if in some ways you had an advantage because big banks are so bureaucratic. So even a medium-sized bank that's 3 times your size, they got to a point where people couldn't actually talk to a human being when they were working on their loan application, and they got confused because the volume was just too high. And decisions were made in other states by the corporate ownership that designed the internal websites. I mean, this is sort of a leading question. I mean, were there advantages you had being small and nimble?
Yes, absolutely. I think we were able to pivot very quickly. And I think some of your larger institutions were building systems to support this because they knew they wouldn't be able to handle the volume. So in doing that, they weren't afforded the opportunity to talk one-on-one to all these customers that needed their assistance. I don't think that's through any fault of theirs. I just think it's based on size. So
you had fewer, but were you able to talk to those 51? Like, did you have conversations? Did your 8 people talk to all 51 of those customers?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Every single one of those customers was touched multiple times during the process, either through email, through phone, and kept them informed of the process along the way. Yes, absolutely.
And were they able to reach a person, like at a bigger bank, they would send you an email saying your thing's being processed or there's a problem, but you weren't able to contact anyone back. It would say, do not reply. When Solar Youth or ARC or Emerge were confused about something, were they able to get Maureen or someone else by a name and get that answered?
Yes, they were. And the
Can you
phone
think of an
number,
example of something, like you think example, something Easter Day or before that, the day after, where you don't have to tell me who the client was, a specific question that you answered personally?
well, I didn't answer it personally, but our commercial lenders did. And, you know, it would be, they would guide them. And we're especially seeing that now with the second round, Paul. Some of the customers that we're dealing with now need a little more hand holding. And so we're spending a lot of time with them, helping them to get together what they need so we can file the application for them. So a lot of it
Let's tell
revolves.
people about that. That's a good pivot, Maureen. I just want to remind people that they're listening. You're listening to WNHH's Dateline New Haven. And we're talking about the new round, both rounds of federal aid to small business. Can we get this to the community? Well, one bank that's a community bank, New Haven Bank, is getting these loans to small businesses. And the CEO of the bank, Maureen Frank, is on with us today at 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. So Maureen Frank, as you mentioned, there's a second round. $60 billion of the new money has been targeted for community banks like yours. And it's for they're for riskier borrowers in some senses. So can you walk us through that? You were about to do that before I interrupted to do an ID. What is this money intended for? How's that coming through and how are you doing it?
Well, I think what we're seeing this second round, Paul, are smaller businesses. Their needs along the way maybe have not been as sophisticated as some of our other customers. They're smaller. They might be just a small mom and pop. They might be a barber shop. They might be a small deli. They've, you know, kind of handled their business through their own personal checking accounts. They're sole proprietors. So, you know, we are helping them gather their payroll information and what they need to present to us in order for us to have a completed application to get it approved. So
that's a good thing you brought up. That's interesting because when you gave me that list of groups before, a lot of those are used to getting grants or philanthropic funding. So they have to have these forms filled out already every year to stay in business, like their quarterly payroll or their 990 tax forms. You just mentioned these smaller businesses is one I was trying to help, who they hadn't done their taxes in 2 years. Are businesses like that even eligible, or do you have to be up to date?
I am not quite sure of that, but I think I'd have to get back to you on that one. I'd have to get back to you on that one.
You're talking about people who they don't have, you said they need more help preparing than in that first round.
Right.
So
right.
Are you in fact dealing with a barber shop? Are you dealing with a small deli?
Yep. So we would take a ledger that they have as their payroll, as evidence of their payroll. We have to have evidence of their payroll. So.
And are you the lender? Do you have to be satisfied or alone, or does the SBA have to see that document too? Or do they just say, okay, community bank, you're chartered. We're going to trust you that you've done the due diligence?
Well, they're relying on us because both the borrower is certifying to certain things and the lender is certifying to certain things.
Right. You're on the hook if somehow it doesn't get paid, if they don't use the money to pay as they promised, so then have the loan forgiven, correct?
Well, one of the things that we counsel them on, Paul, and that's very important, is to keep very precise records of how you have spent this money, because that will be the documentation that's needed for your loan to be forgiven.
Okay, so round 2 started yesterday. The Small Business Administration system did crash. They in the New York Times, they talked about bigger banks that were dealing with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, and they got 7 in by the end of the day. Have you gotten any in yet?
Yes, we've gotten about 15 in since
Ooh,
yesterday morning.
very good.
Well, that was
And how
also,
did you experience those crashes? Did you experience the frustrating having to do it 7 times?
we did.
How did you
And
navigate those?
And all I could do at that point is to tell the lenders and the people that were actually, inputting the applications to do the best they could. To when they felt themselves getting extremely frustrated, to back away from it for a little bit. I think
Hmm.
what's happening this go around is the money's going to take longer to deplete because they're kind of the SBA is kind of I don't want to say they're manipulating the system, but they're trying to make sure that everybody gets a fair shot this time around, and that the big banks don't monopolize it. So,
Mm.
I think the money's going to take longer to go away. So I think
Mhm.
it gives us a little bit more time, but we are intent in trying to get all our applications in as quickly as we can so that we don't run up against an empty fund.
And how many are you aiming to do? Like how many are you working with? You got 15
Probably,
in.
we're working with another 55 to 60 customers right now.
And it's accurate to say they include barbershops and small delis.
Yes, it is.
The reason I asked is we did a whole show last week about how in the Black community, people are concerned about barbershops because sometimes, you rent a chair for 150 bucks a week. They're, they don't have accountants often or spreadsheets. So you said you're looking at their ledgers and saying, let's keep a copy of this ledger. You're having to be creative.
Yep. And that's really spelled out in the guidance also, that the that the Treasury released. So, we're doing everything we can to get the money where it's supposed to go.
And it sounds like you're doing a good job at New Haven Bank. Now, how does this fit into how what used to be called Start Bank, and I want to say it formed around 2005 or six. I'm not sure, maybe 2010 was it? Um,
2010.
how does this fit into what the mission is, the bank? How does this moment in our history, one we didn't predict, a role you're now playing that was not in your job description, how does this flow naturally from what your personal mission is and what the bank's mission is?
It is a natural flow for us, Paul. We serve the community. Don't forget, we're a CDFI. We're a Certified Development Financial Institution. And what that means is that 60% of the business that we do has to be in low, moderate income areas in order to retain that certification as a CDFI and to be eligible to apply for grant monies. So in some respects, this is a natural extension of who we are and who we've been since the beginning. We have a commercial charter, but we're a community bank, and we understand what our objectives are and what our direction is, and that is to help the community of New Haven. So this has been, it's not that much of a stretch for us to do what we're doing. The difference is, you're lending money very, very quickly out the door, and it's not a credit needs test, Paul. So, these loans are 100% guaranteed by the SBA. 75% of them are forgivable, and they're for a 2-year term. So would we normally do unsecured lending to this degree? No, we would not. Most
And
banks
that means if
won't.
you're the barber shop, you don't have to put up your house
Right.
because you have that guarantee from the SBA.
That's correct. That's correct. So the difference is, that's the difference. But it is a natural extension of what we do as
Will
New
it
Haven.
help you grow in the future, Maureen? Will these bring you new customers? Will this make more viable businesses for you to
It,
have as customers?
we're hoping that, Paul, and I think we're already seeing this. Some of the people that we've helped out, their banks turned them down, said they didn't, they couldn't do it. They had just too many applications, and so they came to us. So we've helped customers that are customers of other institutions, and we were able to get the job done for them. So I think that we will see an influx of new business, and we will certainly court these individuals after this is over.
All right, Maureen Frank, CEO, New Haven Bank. Harry Jones, our station manager. Do we have any questions from listeners for Maureen Frank?
Yeah, we have one more of a comment. Well, we have a couple. They're coming in now. So Rodney Williams says, Paul, let's be clear. This bank is right in the community, but very few minority businesses are able to get any lines of credit. Can I ask, out of the 10 million, how many New Haven-based minority businesses got any money? Give some examples of Black-owned businesses that got anything. Emerge is tied to the state already and always getting grants and funding. They haven't helped nobody in the trenches.
Wow. Thanks for that comment, Rodney. So, Maureen, you said you can't name everybody because you had to get their permission, correct?
That's correct. I do know that we have helped some minority-owned businesses, Paul.
Do you have a sense of number?
I don't, but I think part of the problem is that getting into the community as much as we could on this short notice and helping out as many people as we could. We did, the best that we can do, and we're still trying to do that. We're still reaching out to some customers who we know are minority-owned businesses that have not applied. So we are proactively reaching out to them.
Well, you mentioned about the second round being different, and you mentioned the barbers specifically. Is the second round going to be a better opportunity to get minority-owned businesses that might not have had their paperwork ready or the connections the first time around? Like, are these barbers African-American barbers you're dealing with?
I believe they are. I can't say that, unequivocally. We're not asking for, we can't ask that.
Right.
That's discriminatory. But we do know these places and where these people are. And yes, and as I said, we are reaching out to, businesses that don't bank with us, businesses that are around us, asking if they have a need for this money. So I think we are proactively trying to help as many people as we can in the community, understanding, we're a small institution with very few human resources, if you will. So there's only, we're doing the best we can. But I also have to be cognizant of my employees and their health and welfare during this also. So
right. And you said the way you're dealing with that is you're rotating 50% in, 50% out. You're using 3 floors so everyone can work for like 6 feet away. And it's my understanding not a single member of your organization or their families have contracted COVID. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, let's keep it that way. Harry, I hope you can keep it that way. Harry, do you have other questions there?
Yeah, we have Jawan Carter. How about landlords? A landlord has a commercial residential mortgage under an LLC and tenants are affected. Do banks have the ability to use deposits for market exchanges similar to the reserve process?
I don't know the answer to that question. If you own property, if your tenants are not able to pay their rents, if you have a loan on your property, you can go to your lender and ask for forbearance for up to 6 months.
And then I guess, are these PPP loans going at all to like the larger landlords? They are commercial enterprises.
We do not, I don't think we've done any business under the PPP program there, Paul. We have granted forbearance agreements, however.
That's good. Harry, other questions from listeners?
Jawan Carter again, he says, we need to think more boldly. It's time for banks to set up a better opportunity to use good contracts as collateral for lines of credit.
Well, now that's interesting. So if you're a landscaper and you have a contract that's in writing that says for the next 6 months, we're going to be hiring you and 4 people to work on 12 properties. Maureen, is that because you talked about being creative, Maureen? You talked about how you're letting them use their ledgers, whereas in the past they might have had to use an accounting form that showed their quarterly financial statements. Is that our contracts the kind of documentation that a small contractor can use, Maureen, as the basis for a loan?
For a PPP loan, no, they're not.
Okay.
If you're asking if we would normally, under different circumstances, lend against a contract, we are working with some subs now that are doing some work in the city of New Haven with larger contractors, and we are working with them based on those larger contracts.
I've gotten an education from some of our listeners, Maureen, about how important those subs are. Because, nationally, there's been such a challenge of getting this help to the people who need it most. And it seems like often it's those subs who are hiring people in the community, but have the hardest time getting conventional financing because they often get paid last by the major contractors or their clients, whether they be government, often with set aside. So I'm glad you're working with the contractors. I think that can have a real impact. So you're listening to
We're trying to do that on a larger scale, Paul.
Okay, that's great. We were talking to Maureen Frank, the CEO of New Haven Bank at Whaley and Sherman here on Dateline New Haven. And thanks for your questions, folks. So are there other roles this bank is going to play with COVID, Maureen? I'm hearing a lot of talk from officials in recent days about the next phases of this pandemic. The first phase was that emergency, getting that immediate money in the hand from the federal government so people can last a few more months, getting the greater unemployment. But now people are very concerned about gradual reopenings, whether the second wave might actually be worse than the first wave, and the impact on our economy. That right now we're in emergency mode, but we might be going for an extended recession or depression. When you folks at the bank are doing your economic forecasts, how are you viewing the medium term of the COVID-19 pandemic, and how's the bank strategy going to fit into that?
Well, I certainly don't think the bank is going to look the same at the end of the year as it does now, Paul, as any other bank in Connecticut or across the country. The recovery is, we don't know yet what it's going to look like, right? There's no model for this. This is unprecedented. So we don't know what the recovery is going to look like. Do we think that some of our customers may have some problems? Yes, we do. And I think most banks think that. We're hoping to minimize that and to work with our customers as best we can to help them through this. Give you an example. They may have a 10-year term on their real estate loan with us. Maybe we extend that to 20 years and try to help them that way. So our objective is going to be to work compassionately with our customers that may have trouble coming out of this.
Use the word recovery, Maureen. Yeah. Are we even at that phase, or are we going to first hit a depression? I know you're not the crystal ball, but
No, I don't, and it's probably wishful thinking on my part. We're certainly not in a recovery yet, not even close to it. But I'm hoping that we do go to a slow recovery, Paul, and not a complete depression. I'm optimistic from that vantage point. It depends how quickly we can start opening up the state. I think one of the things that's in the back of my mind is that Yale University, and if they allow their students to come back, will be a big boost for the city of New Haven. And I think that will have significant positive outcome.
I got to start thinking like a banker, Maureen, because you just phrased that in the most positive way. You're seeing the positive impact that's going to come if Yale comes back. All I've been hearing from non-bankers in the local economy is the fretting that what if Yale doesn't come back, the half full, half empty. There's a real fear that the major driver of our economy is not going to exist for the next year. That's not the decision making you're involved in, but that's been the real fear I've been hearing in the last week. What are we going to do if Yale doesn't come back?
Well, I think it's the boost that New Haven's going to need, and I think it will go a long way in helping the city recover. Absolutely.
Definitely. So, what do you, in terms of, you talked about the bank's not going to look the same at the end of the year. What does that mean? Does that mean the work you're doing is going to be different? Does it mean you might get smaller? Does it mean you're going to be finding different ways of getting capital to flow in the city, meaning you're going to continue to be all on top of the emergency measures that the federal government's going to take? Because I think we're going to have temporary socialism in some ways in terms of U.S. Congress funding things they never imagined funding before, and they never will again. So I'm very interested when you just mentioned how you're talking about how the bank, like all banks in the country, will not look the same at the end of the year. What does that mean?
Well, how we deliver service, right? What's our delivery mechanism going to be? You could see now most banks, all banks, not, I shouldn't say all, but most have closed their lobbies to customer traffic. So they're taking their business through the drive-throughs or their ATMs or by phone or online. While there always has been a need for brick and mortar, and I think there always will be, Paul, I think the need might, I think some of your larger national banks may look at that a little bit differently now, because they've been able to close a lot of branches, right? And to protect their employees and to move the business to other branches that were close by. You may see them not reopen. You may see them go to a drive-through type of model or a bank of ATMs. There's a whole host of things that I think are going to change from that vantage point.
So, and people talk about how the technological and business model changes wrought by COVID in some ways are just speeding up change that was already occurring, like you just mentioned. So New Haven Bank was ahead of that curve. And tell me if I'm saying this wrong. You made a decision, again, I always lose track of years, but I think it was about 2 years ago, where you said retail banking is not our forte. Our niche is really lending to local small businesses who don't get that lending elsewhere. So you're down to one branch, but that branch is there. Is that a trend you see continuing? Do you see always having that branch open for people who do want to walk in?
I think we'll always have the branch open for people that want to walk in. And when I say we're not a retail bank, we don't do consumer loans and personal loans and mortgages. We best serve the needs of the community through commercial activity. That's not to say that we don't need to branch out and grow our deposit base more, and you do that by securing additional locations. But what those locations will look like a year from now could be very different than what than what we've envisioned in the past.
That's interesting. So with that, I want to thank you for the hard work you're doing and your staff to continue through this pandemic and get some of that federal spending into our community. You're working hard, you're working creatively, you're getting results. So Maureen, Frank, all the best to you and the crew at New Haven Bank. First of all, I hope you stay healthy still, and I hope the institution stays healthy.
Great.
So thank you for joining us today.
And thank you, and stay well yourself.
Thanks for the questions of our listeners, and thanks to Harry Droz, the miracle man behind the controls, and thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing financial support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long at WNHH-FM, New Haven's home, Community Radio.